The United States District Court for the Northern District of California had never witnessed anything like what was about to unfold in Courtroom 12 on this fateful Tuesday morning in April. Judge Edward Chen, a respected federal jurist with 23 years on the bench, was presiding over what should have been a routine civil rights case involving voting access in underserved communities. The plaintiff's attorney, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, had taken a rare break from her congressional duties to personally argue this case due to its significance for her district and her expertise in civil rights law. The courtroom was packed with legal observers, civil rights advocates, and journalists who had come to witness what was expected to be a significant constitutional argument. Judge Chen had built his reputation as a no-nonsense jurist who ran his courtroom with an iron fist and little tolerance for what he considered grandstanding by attorneys seeking media attention. His judicial philosophy emphasized strict adherence to procedure and hierarchy, with a particular disdain for what he perceived as political theater masquerading as legal argument. He had made his feelings about politician attorneys clear in previous cases, often commenting that elected officials who practice law were more interested in publicity than justice. Jasmine entered the courtroom with her characteristic preparation and poise, but those who knew her well might have noticed an extra leather portfolio alongside her standard legal materials. Her research for this case had uncovered information that extended far beyond voting rights law, information that would ultimately expose one of the most shocking corruption scandals in federal judicial history. She had hoped to avoid using this information, preferring to win her case on its legal merits. But Judge Chen's behavior during the preliminary hearings had convinced her that extraordinary circumstances might require extraordinary measures. The first 3 hours of the proceedings followed standard legal protocol, with Jasmine presenting her case for expanded voting access with the thoroughness and precision that had made her one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in the country. Her arguments were legally sound, well documented, and presented with a clarity that made complex constitutional principles accessible to observers. Even Chen seemed grudgingly impressed by the quality of her legal work, though his demeanor remained cold and dismissive. The turning point came when Chen interrupted Jasmine's closing argument with what appeared to be a prepared statement designed to humiliate her in front of the packed courtroom. "Ms. Crockett," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "while I'm sure your congressional colleagues are impressed by your theatrical presentations, this is a court of law, not a political rally. Your arguments today have been long on emotion and short on legal substance, which frankly is what I've come to expect from politicians who think a law degree makes them qualified to practice before federal courts." The courtroom fell silent at the unprecedented personal attack. Federal judges rarely engaged in such direct criticism of attorneys, and Chen's words clearly crossed the line from judicial authority into personal insult. Several observers exchanged uncomfortable glances, recognizing that something significant was happening but not yet understanding its full implications. Jasmine's response was calm, but carried an undercurrent that suggested the dynamics in the courtroom were about to shift dramatically. "Your Honor, I appreciate your perspective on the relationship between legal practice and public service. Since you've raised questions about qualifications and professional conduct, perhaps we should examine those issues more thoroughly." She reached into her leather portfolio and withdrew a manila envelope sealed with evidence tape. "I think the court and the public deserve to understand the full context of judicial authority and professional ethics before Your Honor renders judgment on anyone's qualifications." Chen's confident expression flickered slightly as he sensed that something was wrong, but his arrogance prevented him from recognizing the magnitude of the trap he had walked into. "Ms. Crockett, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this court will not tolerate any attempts to deflect from the legal issues before us. What I'm doing, Your Honor, is providing context for your comments about professional conduct and qualifications." Jasmine broke the evidence seal and removed a series of large photographs, placing them face down on the plaintiff's table. "Given your criticism of my professional conduct, I think it's appropriate to examine the standards of conduct that Your Honor expects from legal professionals." The silence in Courtroom 12 was complete as Jasmine turned over the first photograph, angling it so that everyone in the courtroom could see it clearly. This photograph was taken on March 8th of last year at the Bellagio Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. It shows Your Honor seated at a private poker table with Vincent "Vinny Cards" Torino, who, according to FBI organized crime files, is an underboss in the Genovese crime family. The gasps that filled the courtroom were audible throughout the federal courthouse. Court reporters, bailiffs, and observers sat in stunned shock as they processed what they were seeing. The photograph was crystal clear and unmistakably showed Judge Chen in animated conversation with a man whose face was well known to law enforcement agencies across the country. Several journalists immediately began recording the moment on their phones, understanding they were witnessing something unprecedented in federal judicial history. But Jasmine was just beginning her systematic destruction of Chen's judicial career and reputation. She turned over a second photograph, this one showing Chen and Torino with several other men in what appeared to be a private casino suite. This photograph is from the same evening, approximately 2 hours later. The other individuals in the photograph have been identified by federal law enforcement as Anthony "Fat Tony" Marconi, a captain in the Lucchese crime family, and Robert "Bobby Wheels" Castellano, who, according to DEA files, is a major narcotics distributor on the West Coast. Chen sat frozen in his judicial chair, his face cycling through emotions of shock, fear, and what appeared to be resignation that his carefully hidden double life was being exposed in the most public forum possible. The authority and condescension that had characterized his demeanor moments earlier had completely evaporated, replaced by the look of a man watching his entire life's work crumble in real time. Ms. Crockett, this is completely inappropriate. These photographs are taken out of context and represent a clear attempt to intimidate this court. Out of context, Jasmine produced a third photograph, this one showing Chen apparently receiving an envelope from one of the organized crime figures while other men looked on approvingly. Your Honor, this photograph shows you accepting what appears to be a payment from Mr. Torino while surrounded by individuals that federal law enforcement has identified as major figures in organized crime. She paused, allowing the full weight of the evidence to settle over the courtroom. How exactly would you like me to contextualize this image? The courtroom erupted into chaos as the magnitude of what was being revealed became clear. This wasn't just inappropriate behavior. It was evidence of potential criminal activity by a sitting federal judge. Court security officers looked uncertain about how to respond, while journalists frantically filed reports about what they were witnessing. Several attorneys in the gallery appeared to be recording everything on their phones, understanding that they were documenting a historic moment in American judicial history. Chen's attempts to maintain judicial authority were increasingly desperate and unconvincing. I order you to stop this presentation immediately. These materials are clearly fabricated and represent an attempt to obstruct justice in this courtroom. Fabricated? Jasmine reached into her portfolio again and produced what appeared to be additional documentary evidence. Your Honor, these photographs were taken by federal surveillance teams as part of an ongoing FBI investigation into judicial corruption. They're supported by hotel security footage, financial records, and witness testimony from multiple sources. She held up a document marked with FBI letterhead. This is a preliminary report from that investigation, which has been tracking your relationships with organized crime figures for the past 18 months. The silence that followed was different from the previous pauses. This wasn't shock or surprise. This was the sound of witnessing the complete destruction of judicial authority and credibility. The revelation that Chen was under active FBI investigation while sitting on federal cases involving the very criminal organizations he was allegedly connected to represented a level of corruption that few observers had ever imagined possible. But Jasmine's most devastating revelation was still to come. She produced a final set of photographs that showed Chen in what appeared to be a private meeting with multiple organized crime figures in a location that looked like a restaurant's backroom. These photographs are from February 15th of this year, just 6 weeks ago. This meeting took place at Luciano's restaurant in Little Italy, San Francisco, in a private dining room that, according to FBI surveillance, is regularly used by organized crime families for conducting business. She pointed to specific individuals in the photograph. The meeting included representatives from 3 different crime families, and according to audio surveillance conducted by federal agents, The discussion centered on upcoming federal cases and how judicial decisions might be influenced to benefit organized crime interests. The courtroom was in complete upheaval as the full scope of Chen's alleged corruption became clear. He wasn't just socializing with criminals. He was apparently participating in organized crime meetings designed to corrupt federal judicial proceedings. The implications for every case he had presided over during his 23-year career were staggering and would require years of legal review to fully address. Chen sat motionless behind the bench, his judicial robes seeming to weigh him down as the evidence of his criminal associations mounted. His face had gone from pale to ashen, and his hands trembled as he realized that his life, as he knew it, was ending in the most public and humiliating way possible. Jasmine delivered her final statement with the gravity of someone who understood she was participating in a historic moment of judicial accountability. Your Honor, you began today's proceedings by questioning my qualifications and professional conduct. You suggested that politicians who practice law are more interested in publicity than justice. She gestured to the photographs and documents spread across the plaintiff's table. I submit that the evidence shows that some federal judges are more interested in criminal enterprise than constitutional law. You've spent years accepting money from organized crime figures while presiding over federal cases. You participated in meetings designed to corrupt judicial proceedings while lecturing others about legal ethics. Most importantly, you've betrayed every principle of judicial independence and constitutional authority that your position represents. The courtroom erupted in sustained applause from the public gallery, with many people standing to acknowledge what they had witnessed. The applause continued for several minutes, representing not just approval of Jasmine's presentation, but recognition that they had witnessed a moment of genuine accountability in a system where such moments were increasingly rare. Federal marshals began moving toward the bench, apparently having received instructions from higher authorities about how to handle the unprecedented situation. Chen's judicial career was over, but his legal troubles were just beginning. Within hours of the courtroom confrontation, the FBI announced that Chen had been arrested on multiple federal charges, including bribery, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The photographs and documents presented by Jasmine were confirmed as authentic evidence from a federal investigation that had been building a case against Chen for over 2 years. The timing of the revelation during a routine civil rights case had been coincidental but perfectly timed to maximize the impact of the evidence. The immediate aftermath sent shockwaves through the federal judicial system. Every case Chen had presided over during his 23-year career became subject to review, with particular attention paid to decisions that might have benefited organized crime interests. Several high-profile criminal convictions were immediately appealed, and multiple civil cases were reopened based on questions about judicial integrity. For the federal court system, Chen's exposure represented a crisis of credibility that would take years to fully address. The revelation that a sitting federal judge had been under FBI investigation while continuing to hear cases raised fundamental questions about judicial oversight and the mechanisms for identifying and removing corrupt judges. Reform advocates immediately called for enhanced background checks and ongoing monitoring of federal judges to prevent similar corruption in the future. 3 months after the courtroom revelation, Chen pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations into judicial corruption. His cooperation led to additional arrests and revealed a network of corruption that extended throughout multiple federal districts and involved dozens of cases over more than a decade. The scope of the scandal ultimately resulted in the largest judicial corruption investigation in American history. For Jasmine, the encounter represented a career-defining moment that demonstrated her commitment to justice regardless of personal or political consequences. Her decision to expose Chen's corruption during a routine civil rights case showed that she was willing to use every available tool to ensure judicial integrity and constitutional accountability. The success also reinforced her reputation as one of the most thorough and fearless legal advocates of her generation. But the victory came with significant personal and professional costs. Jasmine faced criticism from some legal colleagues who argued that her methods were inappropriate and potentially dangerous for attorney-client relationships and judicial independence. Others praised her courage in exposing corruption and argued that extraordinary circumstances justified extraordinary measures. The broader impact on American legal culture was profound and lasting. The Chen case demonstrated that even federal judges were not immune from accountability when their corruption was thoroughly documented and strategically revealed. It showed that the legal system could still function to expose and punish corruption at the highest levels when dedicated individuals were willing to take significant personal risks to ensure justice. The case also highlighted the ongoing threat that organized crime posed to judicial integrity and the need for enhanced security measures to protect the independence and honesty of federal courts. Law enforcement agencies began implementing new protocols for monitoring judicial behavior and identifying potential corruption before it could undermine constitutional protections. 6 months after Chen's arrest and conviction, the federal court system had implemented sweeping reforms designed to prevent similar corruption and enhance transparency in judicial administration. The reforms included regular financial audits of federal judges, enhanced background investigations, and new protocols for reporting suspicious behavior by judicial personnel. 4 organized crime families affected by Chen's cooperation. The exposure represented a devastating blow to their ability to influence federal judicial proceedings. Multiple ongoing cases were compromised. Several high-ranking crime family members were arrested based on Chen's testimony, and the entire West Coast organized crime structure was forced to restructure their operations to account for the loss of their judicial asset. As both Jasmine and the federal court system moved forward from the Chen scandal, the lessons of that April morning in Courtroom 12 remained as a reminder of both the fragility and the resilience of American judicial institutions. Jasmine had shown that thorough investigation and strategic courage could expose even the most carefully hidden corruption when the stakes justified extraordinary measures. The federal court system had learned that ongoing vigilance and robust oversight were essential for maintaining the integrity that constitutional democracy required. The confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Judge Edward Chen would be remembered as a defining moment in the ongoing struggle to maintain judicial integrity and constitutional accountability in American democracy. It demonstrated that even the most powerful and seemingly untouchable figures in the legal system could be held accountable when their corruption was thoroughly documented and courageously exposed by individuals committed to justice above all other considerations.